Hello and thank you for joining us on today's webinar entitled Responding to OCR Inquiries. Will your privacy program measure up? My name is Mike Nesson. I'm the Customer Community Manager at Fair Warning, and I will be your host for today's session. Before we begin the webinar, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. We are broadcasting this through WebEx, and the audio is optimized to be heard through your computer speakers or a headset. If you're encountering sound quality or volume issues and need to join the teleconference, the dial-in information can be found on the Info tab at the top left of the screen or by clicking the phone icon on the right menu bar. I hope to have some time at the conclusion of the presentation for a question and answer session, and I encourage you to submit your questions as they come up so they can be placed into the queue for response. To submit a question, simply type them into the Q&A module that appears on the right side of your screen. We are also live tweeting this event and taking your questions on Twitter during this webinar and after the session is completed. Use the hashtag AnytimeAudit to join the discussion to get your question into the panel. We are recording this webinar, and a follow-up email is scheduled to be sent to you within 24 hours of its conclusion that will include the link to the replay as well as the materials presented today. Additionally, this same information will be posted on our website at www.fairwarning.com. And now I'd like to introduce the speakers joining us for today's webinar. Our first two speakers today are Ms. Janine Lambert, who is the Associate Administrator of Regulatory Compliance and the Compliance and Privacy Officer at the Everett Clinic, and Ms. Sarah Brown, who serves as the Privacy and Security Project Manager at the Everett Clinic. Both are Fair Warning Ready certified professionals and recipients of the 2014 Privacy Excellence Award for Best Healthcare Provider in the Western United States. They will be followed today by Founder and CEO of Fair Warning, Mr. Kurt Long, and the Executive Vice President of Customer Value Creation at Fair Warning, Mr. Shane Whitlatch. And as you can see from the agenda slide, Janine and Sarah will take us through the following topics. An introduction and about the Everett Clinic, why Fair Warning, rolling out the new privacy program, investigations, findings, and results, and OCR inquiry. Kurt and Shane will follow and discuss the following items: doing the right thing for patients, and an industry update. And with the time remaining, the panelists will all return to answer your questions. And before I turn the presentation over, please allow me to provide some background on Janine and Sarah. Janine is the Administrator of Regulatory Compliance and serves as both the Compliance and Privacy Officer at the Everett Clinic in Everett, Washington, with oversight of privacy, security, and program integrity. Janine has more than 20 years of experience in healthcare business operations, coding, regulatory compliance, and privacy, where she is responsible for the development and implementation of organizational compliance programs and organizational strategy related to new laws and regulations associated with compliance and privacy. She oversees all HIM and regulatory compliance functions, including privacy and compliance training, contract management oversight, billing and coding audit, physician education, audit management, and strategic planning to senior leadership and the board of directors. Sarah Brown joined the Everett Clinic and has been there since 2005. She worked as a primary care practice manager and joined the compliance department in 2011. Sarah has a master's degree in healthcare administration and is a certified medical practice executive, as well as a healthcare privacy compliance. Her primary activities focus on patient privacy, workforce education, and event resolution. So let's get started and welcome the 2014 Privacy Excellence Awards winners from the Everett Clinic, Janine Lambert and Sarah Brown.
Hello, everyone. This is Janine Lambert. Sarah and I have split up the slides today, so I'm going to begin and give a brief introduction of the Everett Clinic for those of you who are not familiar with who we are. The Everett Clinic is a physician-owned multi-specialty clinic. We've been in practice since 1924. We're about 35 minutes north of Seattle. Go Seahawks, right? We're going to take that Super Bowl again. Anyway, there's about 450-plus healthcare providers. We learned today we're adding 70, so that's kind of our organizational strategy for recruitment for next year. 17,000-plus staff, 880,000 annual visits, and 307,000 active patients. We're the largest independent medical group in Washington, and we've been a Fortune magazine 100 best companies to work for in 2011, 2012, and 2013, still awaiting our 2014 survey to see how we did this year. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that a lot of people ask us, and we thought it would be important to talk about, is why fair warning? And as you mentioned, it is up to Sarah and I to really figure out how we're going to accommodate the work that has to occur out of our compliance department. And we really saw fair warning as a strategy. I had heard about fair warning from another large healthcare provider who was also an Epic electronic health record client. And at a national conference that I was at for the Healthcare Compliance Association, we were just really talking about the future audit requirements with high tech and some of the other things that were coming along. And all of us were also facing what we all face in the industry, and that's resource constraints. So, you know, how are we going to produce an audit that's quality? And how do we staff for that, and how do we really have something that it has some logic and a strategy in what it's looking at? And so at this national conference, Fair Warning actually had a booth, so I went over and introduced myself and saw a brief demo, got quite a bit of information, talked to a few other organizations, and went to my board and said, hey, listen, there's two things I can do. I can continue to monitor all of the different environments that we utilize today with the different audit elements that each system has, which were not alike, and were formatted very differently, which means if you're doing an investigation, you would have to enter information into all of those and run an audit and try to bring it together, which is going to take so many FTE on a return on investment, or I could put my dollars into a product that could bring this all together for us. So after much discussion, the board supported me on that, and Fair Warning was purchased. And we've never looked back. So in 2011, we hired Sarah, and she came on board to our department, was already working at the clinic, and the rest is history. So Sarah?
Yes, hello. Happy afternoon, everybody. I hope you're enjoying nice weather like we are out here in Western Washington. In the fall of 2011, we really began the implementation process here at the clinic through validation testing. It was a quick implementation, but we did a lot of reviewing of the reports that were coming out to make sure that the algorithms we had programmed were really getting us what we wanted and what we were hoping to review. And in the process of that, we met with other business partners in the organization and made some decisions to review and update our privacy policy. And a key piece of that we made a change to was stating that staff could not view their records. The clinic had a cultural mindset that we were allowing anyone to look at their own medical record at any time they chose, and that had been in place for several years, and we finally made a decision to say, no, we're not going to allow that going forward. So that was updated in the privacy policy and shared and rolled out organization-wide in the fall of 2011, including signatures from all staff stating that they knew and understood the policy and the changes. In December of 2011, we began reviewing the audit logs in an official capacity. Next slide, please. And one of the decisions we made was really we chose to make no formal announcement to the staff about the implementation of the software. And the reason that we had done that was because the clinic had a policy that outlined appropriate use that had been in place for several years. Washington State has the Uniform Health Information Act that was passed in 1990 and had very similar outlines to HIPAA privacy rules and regulations. So the organization had been in the mindset of auditing and monitoring for several years, and we felt that adding attention would say, oh, well, if you were doing it in the past, you really need to stop. If you were doing it in the past, we felt that you were just as much at violation as if you were doing it now, even though we could identify that more easily. So we made a choice not to notify. Prior to having fair warning, audits were done, but they were done randomly. So just picking random self-audits to do, doing audits at requests of others, who felt maybe their privacy had been violated. That's really how we were generating our audits. And so having this more streamlined procedure was helpful for us in terms of a consistent identification process. Next slide. Unfortunately, we quickly realized that our policy change as it relates to employees accessing their own medical information was very ineffective. Although we had collected signatures, people stating they'd reviewed the documentation changes and the new requirements not to view their record, the number of people violating that policy would have resulted, if we had pursued that to follow up and educate those individuals in a formal fashion, we did not have the resources to do that. So we changed our policy back to the way that it was before, and allowed allowed staff to access their own chart to view items, but not to make any changes or alter the chart in any way. We also had numerous events of staff accessing the charts of family members inappropriately, and that is really where the rubber hit the road for us in terms of our workload and what was coming in front of us. Next slide, please. We really were not prepared for the volume of the investigations that fair warning essentially spit out for us to follow up on. And we unfortunately had 43 employees involving 55 patient records that we needed to follow up and meet with in a formal fashion. In the clinic, past precedent had set that standard practice for reviewing these types of violations was for the compliance team to meet with and partner with HR during the interview of staff that had been identified as a policy violator. And our HR team was already at capacity as it was, so adding on 43 additional meetings that required preparation of both the HR team, the compliance team, and the employee's manager was really a big on-taking for us. It was a lot of work, and we were really not prepared for that. Next slide. So as I stated earlier, we did go ahead and reverse the policy related to self-access, look but don't touch. But because we had so many violations coming in all at once, we really needed to work on developing an internal criteria for applying fair and equitable enforcement of our policy. And as part of a good compliance program, that's really key. So what that meant is we had to look at our violations, and regardless of who you were and what role you were in, we had to treat that violation the same. So our violations were not just frontline staff. We had providers that had made these violations. After we reviewed and investigated all 45 of these violations, a handful were explainable and work-related, and as we got more comfortable with the fair warning results, we're able to weed those out very quickly now. And many of them had some confusion with friends and family. Prior to 2009, the Everett Clinic utilized a form we called Friends and Family, where patients could sign a form that stated, you may give verbal information to these family members, and then they would sign that form, and it went into the patient's chart. And many of our employees, not many, but some of those who violated this policy felt that that friends and family form gave them the ability to open their electronic medical record and review essentially anything that they would like. So the fact was is the form was very clear that that did not give patient or the staff members permission to view patient charts, and that's also part of one of our privacy policies here at the organization. It stated that. So we did some re-education as well with our staff. There was a wide variety of outcomes. Next slide, please. So for those that were not work-related or explainable, disciplinary action was imposed based on previous similar violations. So even prior to fair warning, if we had some type of violation, we had to review that and say what was similar, what was our outcome, what kind of did we re-educate, did we dismiss, how did we handle those scenarios? Again, that consistent and equitable enforcement of the policy was really important for us. In the end, we had variation from a verbal warning for individuals to dismissals. The Everett Clinic has an appeals process for dismissed employees, which is, is certainly a benefit for our employees. And at the end of the day, one person that we dismissed was rehired based on additional information that was provided after the investigation was completed. So that was a good learning lesson for us in terms of additional questions that we decided we would ask during the interview process while we were working with the employee's manager. Next slide.
So what occurred then was really many of employees involved and employee family members involved went to local media, and we don't know who went to the media, and as you all know, as standard of practice, the Everett Clinic or any employee does not share employee action information publicly or information about protected health information. I know that many of us in the industry read about an organization that made that mistake in defending themselves. They actually violated the very law that they are to uphold. So when someone went to the local media, we were obligated to respond because local media wanted to come to us and was asking for a statement about this. In addition, one of the dismissed employees responded to an open invite from the paper to tell their side of the story. So this really, in our market, was front page news, and it was picked up by AP, and pretty soon it was out there nationally in a lot of the buzzes and tweets and some of the online newsletters. We were really limited in what we could say based on former employee privacy laws, so there really wasn't a lot that we could do except make the Everett Clinic's intention and dedication to patient privacy and upholding those privacy laws our priority, and we really focused on that we were doing what was right for the patient, which is one of our core values, and we believe that we acted appropriately in this situation. Well, for us, all of this media attention, next slide please, prompted a visit from our Seattle-based Office for Civil Rights. Next slide, thank you. And when we first were contacted, they said, well, we want to come out, we want to talk to you about the news stories that we're reading about. We're really interested in this. So when we think about when they were coming, we thought that we were going to be having a full-blown audit, that there were really going to be questions just primarily about how we handled the breach, what were our policies and procedures. And, we have had and dealt with the OCR before, and they have looked at our policies and procedures. So we knew that and felt that we had everything in order, but what we were really surprised at is when the Office for Civil Rights did show up, they really wanted to verify two key aspects of this situation. And number one, they wanted to talk about our patient privacy, and they really wanted to know about this fair warning software. So they were very interested in that. And then the second item is they were really interested in the fair and equitable application of our policy and related disciplinary action. So they really wanted to know the age, the gender, any kind of background on the employees that were involved. Their questions, we spent, I think probably a good 45 minutes with them in a room, and they had A lot of questions for us about our policy and procedure. They wanted to know about our education. Was it done annually? And I think we spent a fair bit of that time, as I recall it, talking about fair warning, the fair warning algorithms, and the technology that allows us to implement such an audit and such a thorough audit of all of our systems, driving not just our electronic medical record through there, but our lab system and some of the other items. And then they wanted to understand what our future plans were, and really, I think when they left the meeting, they were pretty impressed with the software, as we were. And, you know, we had said that we had made the decision to not notify staff before, but that was because we had done such comprehensive education year over year and had done such a thorough tracking of items prior to that and getting out there and talking to our employees, we felt that our employees should know the information. They also had some questions about, were we surprised at the outcome? And quite frankly, we were very surprised when we turned it on that we did have as many accesses to deal with as we did. But we didn't view that as a bad thing. We viewed that as really, you know, just uncovering the rocks and bringing any kind of issues or re-education that we needed to add to our system to light. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we did as part of this process is we decided to take it to our ethics committee. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to present it to that committee. The committee is made up of community members, physicians, staff members here at the Everett Clinic, so quite a large, diverse group. And some of the questions that they had for us is, why didn't we notify providers and staff about the new software? And so we walked them through our process, our decision-making, all of the things that went into the decision to turn it on. And this community cross-section, including our own patients, concluded that our decision was appropriate. The ethics committee, as part of an opinion, when we do take something to the committee, did prepare a white paper, and that was distributed throughout our 2,300 staff members, so that is providers and employed staff. It was a very good exercise for all of us, and it was nice to hear at the end of it to conclude that our decision was appropriate. Next slide.
So throughout this whole entire process, we had a lot of things develop with culturally and in the community as well. And we found that there was actually a lot of community support. You know, we did not go to the newspaper, and we were limited in what we could say, but there were a handful of letters to the editor that were written by patients in the community thanking us for protecting their privacy. It did bring very widespread awareness in the organization that people were being monitored, and that we were following up with those inquiries. It also brought awareness to our community as well that we were handling their privacy in a very professional and thoughtful manner. Unfortunately, there was a level of fear that developed out of this as well in terms of staff accessing records. We preach to our team to ask the question to themselves, do I need this information to do my job today? And if your answer is no, then you shouldn't access the information. But if your answer is yes, you should absolutely get what you need. And there is, for a period of time, there was just this level of untrusting that what they were doing was appropriate. And so I think that's gone away at this point. You know, we're a couple years into this now, and people are very aware and thoughtful in their decisions of what they access. There was a level of staff discord. There were some people that were outraged that some employees were dismissed, thinking that there's just no way that they could have been a participant in this. And of course, we are limited in what we can tell staff as well, and so we really couldn't say anything, and they are only getting the dismissed employees side of the story, which was nothing really we could defend against. And we did even have one employee quit in protest to what had occurred. And sort of with that level of fear also is that hypersensitivity to accessing patient records, where people were just sort of not entirely comfortable at certain points. And for other Epic users out there listening, we utilize Break the Glass primarily for our behavioral health records, and that was one area where there was a raised level of awareness as they were being asked to break the glass. People were really questioning if they needed to or not, which at the end of the day is not necessarily a bad thing, but it could create patient care problems if someone's afraid to access something that they really do need because they're worried that they're going to be reprimanded for that. So I think we've worked through a lot of that at this point, but prior to this environment, there were definitely some hurdles for us to clear with that. Next slide. The fair warning reports, aside from identifying policy violators for us in terms of accessing records, we were able to identify spots where providers may be billing for services of family members. We're a physician-owned organization, and we cannot do that. So we are able to catch some of those things and stop the bill from going out, which is really great, and then educate our providers on what's appropriate. It also does catch staff taking action in their own chart. This doesn't occur that frequently, but again, also an opportunity for us to educate. We don't typically see anything sinister of nature, but occasionally someone will, update an address or start a telephone encounter on their own chart and send it off to a provider. And although they have access, they're allowed to view, we just ask that they not take any action. Next slide. I think it's really important to thank our team that helped us with this. We had several hours of time spent with our HR team. Our IT team has spent a lot of time helping us develop our our algorithms, our board of directors and their support for this, and then lastly our ethics committee is helping us with that. And just to go back, I think we're missing one slide on there that I don't see that was there. But after, just to key you in on where we're at now, after our that initial batch of violations where we had a lot of follow-up, the events that required that follow-up are almost non-existent at this point. We don't see errors or bad choices where staff are accessing charts of family members inappropriately. We're currently running 9 automated policies across 6 systems in fair warning. Our reports are viewed every day, and we're spending approximately 5 to 10 minutes a day reviewing those reports. I mean, we've looked at them enough that we can go through them fairly quickly and pull out what is a possible violation to investigate further. There's 2 staff members who can perform those audits quickly and 3 total that can review for those violations on any given day.
All right. Thank you so much, Janine and Sarah. As I mentioned previously, please send us your questions for Ms. Lambert and Ms. Brown through the WebEx Q&A module or using the hashtag AnytimeAudit on Twitter. We already have some really great questions that have come in, so please keep the questions coming, and we'll get to as many as we can at the conclusion of the next segment of today's presentation. And that leads us to our next speakers. They are founder and CEO of Fair Warning, Mr. Kurt Long, and the Executive Vice President of Customer Value Creation at Fair Warning, Mr. Shane Whitlash. Please join me in welcoming both of you gentlemen.
Thank you, Mike, and this is Kurt, and I have a couple slides here to kick things off. But listening to Sarah and Janine speak today on the topic of patient privacy and privacy monitoring, it really reminded me of why we introduced the Privacy Excellence Awards in 2013. And what had happened over the prior years is we had found that our customers as compliance and privacy and security professionals, what we saw in them was a tremendous amount of courage, innovation, and dedication to do the right thing for patient privacy. And to be frank, I got very much reminded of those criteria listening to Sarah and Janine speak, and it comes as no surprise to me that they won the Privacy Excellence Award for the Western region. So congratulations, guys, and thank you for being on the webinar with us today. We appreciate it very much, and I think your information is incredibly valuable. One thing I wanted to start out with is the Hippocrates Oath from 4th century, before the Common Era, all that may come to my knowledge in the exercise of my profession or in daily commerce with men, which ought not to be spread abroad, I will keep secret and never reveal. That's obviously just one component of it, but it's an important component that we've been struggling with now for 2,500 years, and Janine and Sarah are helping the industry keep that oath, and we see that as an inspiration for our vision today. Next slide, please. Yep. We see that as our inspiration today, that we fair warning our customers envision an industry, a healthcare industry, in which patients can confidently share their sensitive medical details to receive the best care possible without regard to privacy concerns. It's really what's doing the right thing for the patients. And as part of today's webinar, we'll be distributing a vision document from Fair Warning about where we are, where we're going together with our customers. So watch for that to be distributed. And then I think really my only role was to kind of set the vision, the collective vision for us. And Shane, you're the star of the show here in terms of delivering the meaty content.
Thanks, Kurt. I'd star the show after Janine and Sarah. So thank you for that. And I have a few things to go through, and based on the materials that were presented by Janine and Sarah and described in such detail, I want to highlight a few things. And because we serve so many customers that represent a wide range of both size and complexity, we have to support many different models of how health systems approach privacy and security. While many choose, like Everett, as we learned today, not to communicate too much about their monitoring program and have obtained obvious success, again, as we learned today, we do have customers who have asked for templates from us to help them communicate not only to their employees, but also patients and even physicians that they have a system in place for monitoring and they're taking that privacy seriously. And I'm showing just a couple of examples of what customers can and do order from us. So Janine and Sarah also mentioned staffing and HR capacity challenges, but listening to them, at least I quickly realized their expertise, both in terms of a few people, but also just their abilities and capabilities and their efficiency for running their system. That's a luxury for many of our customers. And we saw this staffing challenge both in terms of number of staff, but also qualifications of staff back in 2012, and we began building and staffing a managed privacy services offering that we launched last year, and it's been an overwhelming success. This service essentially gives our customers instant access to world-class expertise and adds an element of sustainability to your HIPAA compliance program. The service offloads much of the burden of the day-to-day monitoring and initial investigations, but it also helps with policy development that was talked about earlier based on our best practices that we've learned over the years with our customers as well as with our expert staff. And we can do it in a very efficient manner and an attractive price point for those who don't have the staff or have experienced turnover. It's also been attractive to some customers who are under a very short time frame to achieve an acceptable level of user activity monitoring attached to a regulatory requirement such as the OCR audits or meaningful use. So what we've seen in the industry is kind of a transition from even when Everett purchased the software several years ago from snooping, curiosity snooping and family member snooping and those type of activities, which are very serious and need to be addressed. The industry has shifted. The threats that are facing us as care providers as well as business associates, quite frankly. And you'll see on this slide, it's widely publicized statistic from 2013 that 43% of all identity theft was originating in healthcare. This is, at least to us, it was a startling number given the number of industries covered. Now, in mid-year 2014, healthcare has 45% of all data breaches, according to the Identity Theft Resource Center in July. And you can see the links to their site and to the study here on this slide. We clearly have a lot of work to do to fulfill on that vision, and I want to show you a few more statistics before we look at the whys and how we can help combat this together. So crime rings want medical data for profit, very simply. This is not news to many of us, unfortunately, with the publicity around recent cases such as, Armenian crime ring arrest last year, $223 million false billing takedown that resulted in 89 arrests in 8 cities, the physical violence detailed in the Russian crime ring arrest in New York last year, and there are many more. But this article that we have on the screen was posted originally on an EMR and HIPAA blog and then reposted on a HIMSS LinkedIn group site. And essentially, Mr. Gross is saying that criminals have their eyes on patient records. And he has a chart here showing just how valuable a medical record can be. And using his example, a patient record will fetch an average of $50 each, where a credit card account is worth $1. He goes on in his article, and it's not in here, but you can see if you click the link, you can go to the full article. And he talks about the impact of that theft, and it's not just financial, and we heard about that in a CBS News report as early as this morning that I'll talk about in a minute. This next one is really interesting, especially to us being, as fair warning, being a software company. Krebs on Security posted this recently, and you may know Mr. Krebs as the one who broke the Target identity theft, the breach story, many months ago. And I know in the WebEx it may be hard to read, but what this picture is showing is a software application that is used by crime rings to track theft and value of the stolen employee data. The red, green, and blue, and again, I know it's hard to read the detail, but those colors show where the identity is in the revenue generation process. Basically, this is a CRM for criminals. If you read the article, you will see that the software shows where they have the Social Security numbers, where they have the address, where they have demographic information, if a tax refund has been ordered or even paid, for example. And the result is that you end up with a house in Tampa, Florida, which is close to our headquarters, that is filled with workers processing tax returns from stolen employee data. And now sophisticated criminals are selling the software program to other crime rings. So this one, again, this is a little different angle to what we're trying to defend against. And again, I'm showing you things that are mid-year trends, 2014. And this quote from, and you can read it for yourself, was from the EVP of the New Hampshire Medical Society, speaks to a recent trend where he just started hearing from doctors in his state indicating that they were receiving notices from the IRS after they filed their taxes that someone has already filed in their name. And as of April, and again, this is this year, he had heard from 111 physicians. He went on to say that he's been there for 4 years, and this was the very first time he had heard of it. Why? Well, I've already shown that criminals have figured out that healthcare is vulnerable, and now that they have employee data, not just PHI, they have figured out who may have the money, the largest amounts, if you will, in the bank accounts, the highest credit limits, and even the credentials to open up false clinics for false billing schemes. The criminals don't necessarily need to corrupt a physician anymore for some of those schemes, and it's not a stretch to think that the executives could be the next logical target. So I encourage you to read the whole article. We read all of this so we can continue to offer analytics that I know Sarah and Janine mentioned earlier to help identify signatures of this type of activity. This is the next slide. This is one that just came out. It looked like it was yesterday. We just saw it first thing this morning around 5 a.m. And I won't spend too much time on it because you can read it using the links provided. But there are a few things I want to point out. First, it confirms all the previous slides about the vulnerability in healthcare. That criminals are now targeting medical identities. They're targeting the data that we're trying to protect and that we're entrusted to protect. It also points out that the problem is significant. There's now 1.85 million victims of medical identity theft in 2013. That's an 825% increase from when this source first reported it in 2006. And finally, the article points out that while the financial impacts of medical identity theft are daunting, the impact to patient care can be grave if not detected in advance. So if we bring this back to the topic today, if you will, and as a business associate to hundreds of customers, we are well aware of the OCR audits and the timelines, and I'm sure many of you on this WebEx are as well. Surveys were beginning to go out this summer. Notification should begin in the fall, with the initial rounds of audits beginning as early as late 2014. As OCR indicated that they will be focusing on the deficiencies identified back in the initial round of audits in 2012, where user activity monitoring was identified as a top security deficiency. Fair warning technology and services is core to the audit readiness of many of you on this webinar, and it's what it was built to do. So what does fair warning do at its core? And really, Janine, I think, was speaking on some of their results and probably said all of this better than I can. But how can we help with, defend against what's been talked about not only by us but also by Janine and Sarah? And at the heart of fair warning, what we do for our customers is we reduce the risk posture and help them comply, and quite frankly, literally drive the breaches out of the business. Our core software, which has been voted best in category by KLAS in 2014, is at the heart of everything we do. It's fourth-generation technology. It automates many things that Janine and Sarah talked about, user and patient investigations. It automates proactive analytics and filtering to identify potential privacy breaches by looking for known signatures of suspect activity. It also includes the idea of creating a legally defensible posture by having a central repository for your incidents, their status, and any created attachments to those so that you're always positioned in a defensible position. And finally, governance reporting is a key component of the software so that you can respond to an audit internally to an audit committee or to a board of directors or to an external auditor. And Janine and Sarah mentioned this explicitly, and literally show them your results, why you did what you do, what your policies are, and how you're enforcing that, essentially showing your effectiveness through easy-to-access dashboards and reports that can be exported and incorporated into an audit report. So that's at the core of what we do, but like I said, I can't say it any better than what's already been said. So before we go into the Q&A session, I'd like to begin bringing Sarah and Janine back. We put a few links up here. We do have a managed services advanced demonstration that is coming up in the near term, and the link to that is in the first bullet. We have a client success story that features the Everett Clinic that covers some of the things that were mentioned today, and you can download that via the link above. And then finally, we released a vision document today that is also available following the link there on our website. So with that, I'd like to bring our guest speakers back. And I know we have a whole host of questions to go through.
We do have a lot of questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. I'm going to just go ahead and start with the first question that we have, which is how much participation was required from your clinical solution vendors to consolidate the audit log data into fair warning, which could be an issue with some vendors?
Well, this is Janine, and I'll try to answer that. We don't have our technical folks from our IT department, security, involved, but what the software that we've added so far that I could speak to is SoftLab. I don't know if many of you use them out there. We didn't really have too much difficulty at all. We've identified the systems that we wanted to add, and then our IT folks reached out with them with the fair warning help, because there's technical support for this. And many of the vendors that we have worked with have already worked with fair warning, so we just really didn't have any problem at all to get that information in there. And I think we could provide more information on that after the call, and would be glad to do that, and just would have Matt, who is our IT specialist, respond maybe in writing to this. Would that work?
Janine, this is Shane, and that is perfect. It's like when you hear something that sounds really easy, it usually means there's a lot of hard work underneath. So that's good to hear that was your experience. Part of what I do in the value creation role is I work with our Fair Warning Ready team, which is really the team that does the work to produce that, I guess, the integration that Janine you spoke of, or that may not have looked too difficult.
No.
And it's been a road, and I know you guys have Epic, you have SoftLab, you have some others, and really we reached out years ago to them to reinforce the need for providing better data and for the importance of what they're doing, what our customers are doing with that data. and we launched the data definition guide as as an open copyright to all of the vendors, the EHR and the clinical vendors. And I have to say, some welcomed it. Epic was one of those early ones that worked with us, and we worked with them. They produced a lot of really good data. They've continued to add and take unnecessary data out, add data to it. They've been very, very good to work with, as have many others. There's over a couple hundred vendors that are in that program, all at different levels. It's still an effort. There's still vendors that are not, in the Fair Warning Ready program, if you will, but the process is we reach out to them on our own. We reach out to them once we have customers that are asking for it. And we have it down pretty well, but it's through a lot of effort. It's through a lot of support from our customers, so that's good to hear. But we're always looking to add more standardization. So,
all right, thank you, everybody. We're going to move right along to the next question, and that is, did the change include the viewing and printing of their own records, or just view only?
Staff could always view and could do some limited printing. We ask that if someone wanted to print an entire chart that they use our HIM team so that we can accurately track and log. But if someone wanted, a lab value here or a last office visit there, that we weren't super concerned about that. So that was the prior policy. We changed it asking that people not view or print or anything like that at all. And then we had to go back to what our prior policy was of allowing people to view their record and then print a few things here and there, because just way too much access of people viewing, period. If we had to take the same action with all those staff that we did with the others who violated policy pieces at the clinic, we would have been short a lot of people.
And this is Janine. One thing that we're looking at, again, is we're looking at our policy of allowing our employees and staff to look at their own record. We have an excellent tool on our electronic medical record whereby they could have access to their record via a portal. And so once again, the questions being posed, we are sort of uncommon in the industry in allowing employees to do this. And so we're just trying to relook at this again to say, is this the best practice to have?
All right. Thank you both. The next question we have is, what was the reasoning for reversing the policy on allowing staff to access their own medical record?
Well, it's a very simple question or answer, I think, is I don't want to have a policy in place that no one's following. And from our perspective, this was ingrained in our staff and had been for a very long time. And our board of directors had the question posed to them, and a decision came down from them that based on the input that they sought through survey, that they were going to allow it. So I don't know if we'll continue to do that in the future, because that survey is coming up again. And with all of the new tools that we have and new advances with our electronic medical record, we're getting more and more reasons why it really isn't necessary to be able to look that way.
All right. And again, we have a lot of questions. Thank you all so much for these questions. Next one I have here for you both, how many total employees are in your network? Just wanted a comparison related to the 40-plus violations.
Yeah, approximately 2,300 staff and providers.
Okay. And the next question I have here is, please expand on disciplinary action for physicians. Is it equal to actions taken with employees?
This is Janine. Our disciplinary action and our standards are exactly the same. Whether you're a physician owner or a staff member, we enforce the same way.
All right. Thank you. Next one I have here is, can you share examples of additional questions you said you learned to ask during the interviews with staff?
It really is, this is Sarah, it's really more case by case, but what we really learned was to dig a little deeper with the managers, asking, was someone out that day that would have resulted in that employee performing a role that was outside of their normal scope? Is it possible that there was a family issue or something of extenuating circumstances that would have resulted in that decision-making being different than normal? And that was those were pretty much it, but really it had to do with digging deeper in terms of what was the environment on that day at that time in the department that could have resulted in that being accessed for what we would see as possibly non-work related reasons, but could be justified a different way.
Okay, the next question I have is, during the OCR audit, were you required to produce training logs to defend that the affected employees were appropriately trained?
This is Janine, and actually we didn't have an OCR audit out of this event. As a matter of sequence, what we had was the OCR up here wanting to learn more about fair warning, about our process, about the fact that we made the decision to do the right thing and terminate and follow our policies and procedures. And they really did not ask for anything at that time. We had had a previous OCR investigation where they did come in, and it was just a sampling, and they did ask for logs of all of our employees that were educated. They wanted to see our education material, and that was, again, a very positive experience for us in working with the Seattle-based Office for Civil Rights staff.
Great, thank you. And this is Shane, Sarah, and Janine. We're getting, I know you answered this earlier, that it's essentially the same policy for employees, even if they're physicians, but we continue to get a few more questions about that. Could you elaborate on just how, maybe it's not so much the policy, but how do you handle physicians that are inappropriately accessing patient information? Because like I said, we're still getting 2 or 3 more questions on that.
Yeah, we use our same investigation checklist, and I think we'd be glad to share that with participants. And I think, in my mind, in looking at the industry, it's pretty similar to what I see other larger organizations doing. But we go through the checklist, and then based on the fact that a physician can either be a contracted physician or a shareholder, we will get HR involved, and we will get our clinical practice manager or facility medical director. These are kind of some titles in our organization, and our chief medical officer together, and we will sit down and conduct an interview with the physician, just like we do with the employee. We ask a series of questions. We actually would be glad to share those questions as well. And once we go through the questions and we get the answers, because, you know, a big part of your investigation is understanding what was going on and why they were in the record. There is a unique set of situations that can happen in our electronic medical record where a staff message can be sent by one provider to another provider. So it may have been a family member, but a treating provider may have reached out to another treating provider and said, you know, this is what I think, take a look at the lab results. So we really have to go through all of those questions. And once all those questions are answered and we ask questions about, depending on the family member, are you in the process of getting divorced? Do the children live with you? Is there joint custody? You know, all of those types of situational questions, that's how we come down to figuring out what action will be taken. I hope that helps. It's so unique to the situation, but we do have standard templates and standard questions that we follow during the interview. And who is at that interview when we start that investigation and when we decide that we need to have that face-to-face visit, because everybody has that face-to-face meeting to talk about why that action was taken and why they were in the medical record.
Okay, the next question I have here is, I have received a complaint letter from HHS OCR and was wondering if, wondered if they have received a letter and how they responded or did not respond to support their stance to the complaint.
You know, we have, over the course of the years that I've worked here, received complaint letters from the Office for Civil Rights. And we respond quickly and thoroughly, and sometimes the Office for Civil Rights will agree with the action we took or our policies and procedures. And sometimes they will offer advice or will ask us to amend our policy procedure, or they think that there's something missing, or they may point out there might have been some deficiency. For the most part, we've been very fortunate with the complaints that we have responded to. You know, I can think of a couple situations where once we have handled a complaint, then they still will go to the Office for Civil Rights, and we have very good record keeping about the steps that we took, and, you know, those are similarly the things that we've seen just a handful of times where the patient will not like our outcome, and they'll go to the Office for Civil Rights, and they'll investigate what we did, and they'll say that we acted appropriately. But if you do get a letter, it's to respond to it quickly, make sure that you follow any timelines that may be identified in there, and you know, it's just really an open communication with the Office for Civil Rights, and many times you can improve your process by getting those complaints. So I look at them as positive. I mean, everybody's going to get a complaint. It's just the nature of what we do.
Janine, this is Shane. For this webinar, we've done, I don't know how many dozens and dozens and dozens of webinars we've done, but the questions are just continuing to come in. We're clearly going to run out of time, so Mike will provide the details, but what we're going to do is we'll package up, just like we always do, the questions that are remaining and send those over. We'll append the answers that you can provide, that you're able to provide, so that everybody that's registered and is on this webinar will receive the questions and answers as part of the process. Additionally, some of these questions we'll be able to answer with our managed services team in that managed service demo that I mentioned on the last slide we looked at, where we'll go into even more detail on it. These are really good questions. So we'd like to end, I think, with one more for you, if you're able to. Mike?
All right. Thank you, Shane. This last question, in allowing staff to access their own records, isn't it also an issue that this is being done on company time and is inconsistent with standard policy of viewing records only on as-needed basis as part of patient care?
Sarah's nodding her head at me. This is Janine again. You know, in allowing staff to access own records, well, first of all, we don't see that much access. So it's not like 2,300 people are looking at their records every day. It happens infrequently. It normally happens around a care encounter. We view this, the company does, as their own medical records. And if they're in their own medical records viewing a lab result for 5 seconds, and they are allowed 2 15-minute breaks and a half-hour lunch, it's not really anything that we've seen any volumes on that has concerned the company. And that is why the company has that policy.
All right. Thank you all so much. That is all the time we have today. Again, we are going to put the additional questions on our website, so please on fairwarning.com, where we will have the material from today's webinar, and also look for the follow-up email that we'll be sending out within the next 24 hours. So I invite you also to follow us on Twitter at Fairwarning Inc., where we have lots of great information as well, and continue to use the hashtag that we're using today, AnytimeAudit. So thank you all very much for attending, and have a wonderful afternoon.